We're seeing people come in, Brynne. Well, welcome everyone to Insights into Leadership Trends for 2023. My name is Dave Veale. I'm founder and CEO of Vision Coaching, and I'd like to introduce my co-moderator and daughter, Brynne Veale. Brynne, thanks for agreeing to support me today and be part of this. And we did this last year, didn't we?
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here today. This follows up on the very successful panel last year, and I'm excited about the panel we have here today.
Okay, and last year we did it. It was deepening leadership capacity of women, and you were a star and a hit. So I thank you for agreeing to come back.
Yeah.
We're going to introduce the panel in a second. You can see some of their pictures, and oddly, you can see my picture a few times. We're not sure what that's all about, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But I'd first like to make an important acknowledgement. I come to you from St. John region in New Brunswick, which is part of the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq peoples. And my colleagues at Vision Coaching and I live and work on traditional territories of First Nations and Métis people. We pay our respects to elders past and present. So I know we have people coming in from coast to coast in Canada, and abroad. Welcome. We're excited to introduce you to our panel in a second. What I would like to do is a couple housekeeping items. We've got 90 minutes and set aside for the event today. We have tech support by Vicky Bates. So if you have any challenge with tech at all, you can chat, the chat function, you can reach out to her. And then we're going to be doing a Q&A portion in today's session at the end. But before we go into the Q&A, like if you have something you'd like to ask, I'll be watching the Q&A, so just feel free to type it up. I believe you can do it anonymously if you'd like. And then as well as if you see a great question being asked and you'd like to, you can actually upvote it. So we can see questions that we should, certainly pause and make sure the panel asks the questions we ask the panel. And our session is being recorded. For people that couldn't participate and wanted to participate, we're going to be sending this out to actually everyone, you as well as people that have participated. If you see something you really enjoy or kind of enjoy hearing or learns from, please feel free to forward this on to a colleague if the recording, if you feel that would be valuable for them. So I'm going to bring in our all-star panel, Brynne. They're going to turn their videos on, and then I'm going to get them to hello, nice to see you all. Just wait for our last. There's Sean, Andrea, Lisa, and Sally. Hello.
Hello there.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited for this conversation. And rather than Brynne and I introduce you, we'd like you to introduce yourselves. And I'm going to start with Lisa.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Haydon. I am the founder and CEO of Pivotal Growth. You've got my bio on me, so I thought I'd maybe just introduce a little bit about the work that we're doing. Pivotal Growth is an executive leadership development consulting company. We're solving leadership problems by enlightening leaders. We're using technology to create insights that drive transformational change. We are using human-backed experience and technology-enabled analytics to work with banks and financial services, professional services, technology, and healthcare companies. And I'm really excited to be here for this IWD event. So happy International Women's Day. And Brynne, I love to see you in the host seat again. So you asked some hard questions last year, so I'm looking forward to what you have in store for us this year.
She has a good question for you, Lisa.
I do.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of the research that Pivotal has done on this very topic, leadership trends for 2023. So thank you for that, Lisa. Sally.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Nice to meet everyone, and Brynne too. Yeah, no, so I'm Sally. I'm based out of Halifax, but I'm originally from Malaysia. So my family immigrated to Canada in 1989. They're entrepreneurs across different industries. My day job now is that I'm the CEO of the Wallace McCain Institute at UNB. And so we run a number of peer group programs for entrepreneurial leaders in Atlantic Canada to help them grow 2x, 3x, So Dave Veale is part of what, ELP Entrepreneurial Leaders Program number 5?
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, there's only 550 of you, somewhat remember. And Sean Hanlon's also one of our alumni in the current cohort of ELP 15. And so definitely awesome to have lots of folks like yourselves join in. But my background's working mostly with tech entrepreneurs in the venture capital accelerator corporate innovation space.
Awesome.
Yeah, super excited.
Thank you for joining us. And yeah, and you do have some exciting work with the Wallace McCain Institute. And yeah, we can certainly speak to that at any point for people that are interested in that organization. Andrea, coming in from St. John's, Newfoundland. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And yes, happy International Women's Day. So right now I am working with Verafin, which I'm sure probably a lot of people know is kind of the darling of Newfoundland because it's been a really great success story. But I'm also here as the managing partner of the Atlantic Women's Angel Fund, which is an angel fund that's going to be investing in women-led startups, which tying into the leadership conversation is really interesting because what do you look for in people that are running companies and what types of leaders do you need to find for those great investments? And then developing women investors at the same time. So that also ties into the leadership conversation as well. So really happy to be here.
Awesome. And you mentioned something in our prep that you know your daughters came up in a conversation around you know, women and leadership, and so you're used to seeing young people in and sharing their ideas and thoughts.
Yes, so actually I was talking yesterday as well. So my daughters are now on their 3rd startup. The first was, you know, classic lemonade stand, but with a bit of a twist. And then a couple of years ago, they collected all these sea urchins and made these Christmas decorations, and they made $2,000 in a week, which is terrible if you're a parent trying to get them to do chores for money, because they're like, I got my own money now. And now actually they're talking about creating a summer camp with a focus on entrepreneurship to teach kids entrepreneurial skills. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, awesome. That sounds cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Andrea. And then we're going to come back to St. John, New Brunswick. By the way, Lisa's in Halifax. Sally, you're in Halifax, I believe. Is that right? Yes.
Yep,
and then,
in Halifax.
And then St. John, New Brunswick is where we find Sean Hanlon.
Hi, Dave. Thanks. I'm Sean Hanlon. I'm the CEO of Dillon Consulting. I'm based in St. John, but we're a national firm. So about 1,000 employees. The company's about 77 years old. It's an employee-owned engineering, environmental science, and planning company. And I'm humbled to be joining the panel. And I guess it seems appropriate on International Women's Day for me to experience what it's like to be outnumbered, where women leaders have experienced it for too many years.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Sean. Looking forward to your perspective as well. So just really excited to have, you know, just kind of the diversity here of thought and experiences. And I'm looking forward to just tapping into your knowledge. You know, we brought this panel together because we know they have tremendous insights for people listening in today. And so, as I mentioned before, if questions come up, just please feel free to put it in the Q&A section for you as you're listening to some answers. We have some prep questions that we sent ahead to the panelists, and I'm going to start with Lisa. And you know, I tapped into this earlier, but this idea of some of the research you've done and Pivotal Growth has done, which I found very interesting. We sent that out for people would have seen some of that. But how do you define great leadership in 2023?
Oh, thank you for that. And I love that I get to start this because obviously this has been an important focus. So let me just do a couple of little reflections. I used to think leadership was more timeless. You know, one of the things that, the anatomy of humans hasn't changed. So as we're hardwired, and leadership has so much of the soft skills and the people side. And it was the leadership research that Dave referenced that really started to shape a different perspective. And we had gone out and did an outlook and trends insights around leadership. And I think there are 3 themes that are really influencing great leadership that we want to keep in mind. And I want to focus just a couple comments around. So think about digital adoption, the shortage of talent or labor shortages, and the millennial and Gen Z expectations and voice. And so these three themes are creating changes in the way we work and in the workforce. And so that means that we're having the opportunity and the challenge to change the way we lead. And so I'm going to take it a little different direction. And this is sort of surfaced by some even more recent experience that we found, that it is about a need for really good strategy. And that is about leadership strategy. And that means strategy at both the organizational level and for you personally, for those who are joining with a personal agenda, but the personal leadership strategy. So, well, where do you start with that? Well, we think it starts with connecting with a leadership type. And what that means is that think about those names that we know, like servant leadership, distributed leadership, transformational leadership, transactional leadership. Those are the key sort of anchors. And last time we did a scan, there was about 13 commonly used ones. And for great leadership and in the trends we're seeing, we think it is really centered about transformational leadership. And this is the type of leadership that really is defining organizational reality and outcomes by being centered on a vision statement. And then the work is about creating strategies that impact getting to that vision statement. And it's really about including attributes and behaviors and motivators that engage the team to make change happen. So it is change leadership that really creates the opportunity for great leadership. An interesting data point to keep in mind and just think about in this sort of thinking about great leadership, 70% of digital transformations are failing. And what's causing them to fail is the ineffective leadership. And so, you've got these trends, you've got things that aren't working as they used, so lots of moving pieces. So where do you go for the information? If you go out to Google and you search leadership, you come back with thousands of returns and of searches, and you think, well, where do I go with that? If you use ChatGPT, you'd get an amazing textbook answer, and yet it's missing the nuances for your team and the emotional intelligence part of it. And then if you went to your network, each of them would give a different point of view and have a different opinion. So what does all that mean? And so, it is for us, we're really focused on creating insights around leadership. How do you get clearer on finding that information that you need? So we're really measuring leadership effectiveness. We're using the data analytics to understand the current state of leadership effectiveness so that we can then connect to that strategy, the vision, the strategy, and the goals. And so that's where, there's this connection to that. And the path to leadership impact for us is and the research really confirmed it even more. It's inside out journey. It starts with personal change, and then it's put into action, in our view, with change leadership. And what I love about the conversation here today is that, women are known for having this phenomenal toolbox of soft skills. And that to me contributes and supports women leaders being phenomenal at this transformational leadership that I just talked about. So there's lots of themes here. And as Dave mentioned, there was much more depth to the research that we did. But I thought this concept of leadership strategy and transformational leadership was an important anchor to start our conversation. And I'm super interested to hear what the panelists share on their point of view around great leadership.
I'm gonna ask the panelists to chime in as well. Before we do that, though, Lisa, when you say inside out leadership, tell me a little more what you mean by that. I love it.
Yeah, and that goes to my comment about the personal change. And so a couple things, and so I'm where to start on that. In the simplest term, oftentimes we all focus on the results, right? The quantitative impact is what we're fueled by. But when it comes to leadership, leadership is really enabled, and the impact of leaders happens from the leader themselves. So that the intrinsic attributes of their personality, their mindset, their interpersonal skills, and then their competencies all contribute to the leadership style that they use to have impact. And that really comes from within. So that's where it's really the leadership development, and that's why we do the type of work that we do. That inner work on leadership is the enabler or the driver that really creates and leads to the sustainable and the highest performance and result.
Right. Yeah, and I think it supports the idea of transformational leadership, like you described. What are any thoughts from our other panelists on this particular topic?
I can jump in.
Yeah. Okay, I think so.
I think around like that, the great leadership is around that like servant leadership, like Lisa touched on it briefly. I think there's so much pressure now in terms of, okay, like what makes a great leader? Like I think today there's Atlantic Business Magazine has the top 25 most powerful women, and how people are actually defined. To me, I think it's like coming back to like the ego. And like, to me, one of the greatest traits of any leader is like, how much are they willing to sacrifice their own personal drivers for their team? And so if that's salary, if it's like we hear stories all the time of entrepreneurs having to sort of not pay themselves because they want to make sure they keep everyone else on payroll first, right? To kind of get through those rough patches. And I think to me that holds true, I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but especially now with everything that's happening in the world and everything changing so drastically, that as soon as a leader is seen as, I'll say, selfish, they lose a lot of credibility across the board, and authority. That I find is they're under the microscope a lot more. And it's one of those qualities that I think stands out a lot these days, I find.
Yeah, well said. Excellent. Andrea.
Just building on that, what you just said, Sally, made me think of just the importance of also being authentic, in your caring for your team. Like, I feel like if you are acting kind of in your own self-interest, but trying to appear caring about your team, like it comes off as just not feeling true to your team. So really actually caring about your team, having their back, them knowing that you value them and want what's best for the team is so important.
Yeah, authenticity, it's such an important attribute. I find I'm really attracted to those types of leaders, where you feel like you know them, and you feel like they're real. Who you're seeing and hearing is actually who the person is, versus maybe a kind of a different persona, right? Sean, I saw that you went off mute, so that's my sign.
Signal, yeah. I haven't heard what Lisa referred to an inside out leadership till just now, and it kind of struck me as from my experience in the past, how difficult any change, let alone transformational change, is to get across. And often the big struggle is, I guess, when you're successful is because the leader truly can communicate why this change is important. And if you're half-heartedly into the change, people can pick up on it. And so it does start with that, like, why are we doing this? And sometimes if you don't have that why driving the change, it's likely to fail, and maybe you should be rethinking whether you do it to begin with. So
awesome. Thanks, Sean. Well, let's move on to the next question here. I'm gonna get Andrew, you to chime in first. That's okay. I think the next question is a great one for you, and that what are the most important skills a leader should possess in today's business environment?
Excellent. Thanks. This is near and dear to my heart. Actually, what Lisa was just saying about the different types of leaders, there's also going to be different types of companies and situations where your leadership style is going to have to change. So, for example, when I was an entrepreneur, I was running small retail stores that you have part-time transitional employees. So how you motivate them and get them excited about their jobs is going to be very different than, a huge international financial institution. And then when I ran the media company, we went through a really, really difficult time. And so how you need to focus on motivating and getting people through a hard time. So there's going to be different times where you need to change who you are, change what your focus is. But I did think about this, and I boiled it down to kind of 5 essential skills. And the first one is actually to build more leaders. I think that is probably one of the most important things a leader in a company can do, is to build up the next swath of people that are going to run the company. And I think the best way to do that is through kind of honesty and feedback. And I don't know if anybody here has read the book Radical Candor, but it's an excellent book. And because people want feedback, That's how you grow, is by learning kind of like, oh, this is how you can do things better, and this is maybe what's holding you back. But I think equally people are really nervous to give it, because it is stressful. Like, you actually have to put yourself out there. You might hurt somebody's feelings, and there's a lot of, social concerns around it as well. So that book kind of gives you the words to say, hey, I'm going to tell you something difficult. I'm doing it because I care and I want you to get better. And even as soon as you say that, whatever follows, I think the person is going to be more open to hear that and can take it and grow from that. And then I think secondly, on that part of building leaders, is just understanding what your team's ambitions are and valuing them and nurturing them. And that will help them feel valued and know that, you're trying to help them progress as well. So that's the first thing. Second thing I think is the vision and mission. So especially like for a small company where you're like, oh, this is maybe not your dream job to work part-time in a store. So how do you get people motivated? And it really is like what the purpose is and why you are there every day. And if you can get the entire company, whether big or small, rallied around those two things, I think it helps everybody feel connected to the mission, connected to what they're doing, and really builds up the culture. Thirdly, I think we already talked about it a little bit, is just caring and empathy, like actually caring about the people on your team. Caring also means communicating, so not leaving people in the dark, making sure that they feel heard, as well as know what they need to know to be able to do their jobs. And then being present. Like, I think in today, especially on Zoom, we're all tempted to kind of like go check our emails and do things on the side and put ourselves on mute and have conversations, but people notice that. So being truly present in conversations is essential. Good measurements. I think that it's not necessarily the leader's job to create them. Like, I think it's better if a team creates measurements and KPIs, but making sure that those are good measurements with good results that enable teams to work together. They know what they're working towards. And then if there is a problem, then you can go back to those results not being met as a very clear way to have hard conversations. So I think that's important. And then lastly, just the courage to act, like a bias towards action. I think leaders today can kind of get caught up in a lot of things, but to your point, Lisa, when you said women are great at soft skills, I think they are also great at, you've got a billion things to do, so you just get them done really, really quickly. And it's not to say that you don't want to be sloppy, but perfection versus getting things done and accomplished and keeping things moving is an important thing. So that's kind of the essential skills. I think it's also important to note that it doesn't necessarily need to come with a title. I think there can be leaders across the company that demonstrate these skills and have a great impact on teams, whether they are the leader or they are just, somebody brand new to the team who is demonstrating these types of skills.
That's awesome, Andrea. I love how you've broken that down. You gave it a lot of thought. And something that just, and I'm going to wait for to see who's the signal, who's going to chime in from the panel here. So I was just thinking about your caring and empathy, and this idea of being present, and how important that is, and how people really feel it when someone's present to them. And I was just with a group of leaders last week on Friday, and we're taking them through exercise on listening, something so simple, but it's just, it really demonstrates the value of being present and what that, the impact that has on other people. And it's we call it a coaching skill, but I think it's a leadership and communication skill, obviously, and how little time and energy actually is sometimes put on that, learning and honing that particular leadership skill. But it really ties into this caring and empathy. Lisa, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I was, just Andrew, really great list. And what I thought I'd share is just sort of some of the things that the research showed, and that we've updated our diagnostic, our leadership diagnostic measurement. So to the comments around sort of that present and the communications, we call it social skills. And it's about having those effective conversation, which means being present. And that's always been top of our list and something we work on with almost every leader and team. So that is really really important. The other two that I thought I'd add, and it gets to your visions and mission, it's that really being clear on strategy. The pandemic put us in a reactive state, and we've been finding leaders are slow to come back to really stepping up big and bold and looking at the big picture and what's possible. And then the final one I'd add, and I think this is, it comes back to that inner work resilience. We're finding leaders are tired. The pace of change, the demands of leadership has just not ended. And so resilience is really, something to be drawn on, so that, to your point, Andrea, that they show up with that energy and that their teams feel that they're, that there's equal energy and engagement, and, that sort of passion and purpose is keeping them all working through what can be some tough days and weeks.
Yeah, it's been a challenging couple of years. And people would say, how does that impact the coaching business? And what my feedback to a lot of people is, well, it actually helped our business in that people were reaching out, given some of the challenges they're up against, which was great to have that happen and be able to support people. Any other additional thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Andrea said. Like, she spoke to me when she talked about the ability of a leader to develop other leaders. And I think it may be a skill or something, an awareness that leaders have to, you actually have to demonstrate a little bit of imperfection so that, folks can aspire to that. Like I've years ago, someone said to me, I was a partner in the firm, and they said to me, oh, I don't ever want to be a partner firm if I have to work as hard as that. And so we speak about having flexible work-life balance. If we don't demonstrate that and show it as a possibility, it creates an environment where they don't believe it's true. And so then you find folks burning themselves out trying to aspire to that. So you got to demonstrate that balance yourself if you want to develop the next leaders who will succeed and take your roles over. So.
Absolutely. I know that's important at Dillon, and just, keeping this bench strength really strong, Sean, and you spend a lot of time and energy there. Andrea, sorry, you got your mic unmuted.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to echo that, because I think being vulnerable and sharing mistakes and how you learn from them, that is super important to do at work. And I also do it as a parent too, just like that is how people learn, and how you can, it kind of goes back to being authentic and being a real person. And yeah, that is an excellent point. Just wanted to agree.
Yeah. I like how when he talks about vulnerability-based trust and the importance of in a highly effective team. And Andrea, you're holding the bar up really high for me as a parent here. So Brynne's taking all this in, which is great. Sally, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, no, for sure. And we got a question in the Q&A too, I think from
Yes.
the Cash asked what leadership skills we had to learn to save our mother and earth, to make our world a better place. So some of the thoughts I was having with that, two of them in particular, I think ties into that. One of them I find when there's specific, I'll say causes that we're really trying to push, right? And I don't actually like calling environment a cause personally, because I think everyone should be paying attention to it, because it's Mother Earth at the end of the day. But I think one of them is like your actual communication skill. And I think in today's, like, one of the really big skills is like, you as a leader, I think you have to know how to communicate in multiple different mediums, multiple different ways. If you, like, I know Dave, you do a podcast as well, like you do these panels, you write, like, I think you need that combination. Brynne, I don't know how old you are. I'm guessing 15, maybe?
13.
13, okay. Right, like, if to me, it's like, if 13-year-olds are my target audience, like, what's the medium, what's the places that they're actually communicating? So I think if we're trying to push things like getting people to save Mother Earth, is like, what is a medium to actually get your message out? Is it 15-second reels? Is it videos? Is it podcasts? What is that? Which then translates to the other skill that I think 5 or 10 years ago, or sorry, not even that, over the years, everyone would obviously say that literacy, like being able to read and write, basic literacy is obviously important, basic numeracy and math. I think digital literacy is huge. Like, I used to have a business that was literally technology coaching for executives, and it was super confidential because executives, leaders, no matter if they're women or men, especially the men, were embarrassed to admit that they didn't know how to send a calendar invite because their assistants always did it for them. And so there's this piece now, like for any leader, like especially I'll say, because it's young and old, it's not necessarily setting that, I'll say that ageist stereotype of it's the 55-year-old. I literally was coaching executives that were 33 that were younger than me. It's just that they're not as comfortable in that. But as a leader, if you're not embracing some of that, you don't have to be an expert with it, but at least to know where those boundaries are, I think really comes together too on how you get that message out there, that change management piece. But then, so those I think are really important. The third one, a friend of mine, Marge, who works for P4G Placemaking, their recruitment firm in Halifax. And she said to me this a little while back. So, because anyone that knows me knows that I am very much ADD. Right? Like I will probably change topics 10, 15 times. You can see my sticky notes because I like sticky notes and like colors. And I definitely have figured out my system to kind of work within those boundaries. But she's kind of said, she's like, I really like to be able to work from a place of stillness. And then my other friend this past weekend, she started this company. She worked for Suncor, and she also has a company that is called Conscious Pause, on getting people to consciously take a pause. And so her whole thing was, we had this women's little mini getaway in Church Point, Nova Scotia. She randomly moved there from Calgary with no family or connections. And she said to me, and with the other two women that we were with, she's like, I hate this word busy. She's like, I wish as like leaders, like we didn't get stuck in this whole world of like, oh my God, like busy, busy, busy. Like it shouldn't be a badge of honor in that way at all, which always it tends to be. And so she said, she's like, now what she's trying to change her language on is, instead of saying busy, she's like, yeah, my week is really full. Like it's full, it's very packed. Yes, it's a subtle change with it, but it's like, can we just redefine what it actually means? And so that we can actually give ourselves that space to work and not being rushed. I'm probably the worst example of that. So I'd say that's a skill. As a leader, I'm not that great at, but I'm very mindful of.
And someone's chiming in. They like your color code system there, Sally. So I'm sure there's a rhyme and a reason to the stickies and the colors. So well done.
Yeah, I should have invested in.
I was just going to say, it's so actually what really kind of resonated with me is knowing your audience and figuring out the medium that suits them. And we had a conversation yesterday about what did you want to get on? Snapchat?
Oh, Instagram.
Oh, sorry, Instagram. See, like I'm, so this is clearly not my audience, but I'm learning. I'm trying to keep up, and we had a big discussion about private and public and all that sort of thing. But it is so true. It's so hard to keep up to, I find. So, but you get well, you're only in private, right? So people can't get you up on Instagram. So let's actually, you've got a question for Sally.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced as a leader, and how have you overcome them?
That's at you, Sally.
Yeah, that's a good question, Brynne. One of the funniest things I always say is, like, when people look at me, they see, like, if you don't see my face and I don't have an accent, people instantly don't think that I'm an immigrant, right? They don't realize that I'm a first-generation immigrant. I was not born in Canada. My family immigrated to the middle of nowhere, New Brunswick, a place called National Village, I always say. And so, but then when they start to see my face, then they recognize, oh, you're a person of color. Oh, you're a female. Oh, you're fairly young. And they start to make these generalizations. And typically what happens is that people underestimate me. I love it, right? Like, my whole thing is like, if someone underestimates me, I'm like, how do I turn that into my superpower? I'm like, great, perfect. You think I'm the shy, quiet little Asian girl that's just going to be quiet and say yes to you. Bring it. It's kind of my reaction. I don't necessarily say that to them face to face, but I think people that when they do start to get to know me and they understand, oh, and I don't mean this I'm not trying to brag, but it's the part where people, when they don't know you, they don't know what you're capable of. But if I'm really trying to, I'll say, put someone in their place because they're pushing my boundaries, I'll be like, oh yeah, can you fly a plane? By the way, I have my commercial pilot's license. Oh, you want to be a little rough with me? I have a black belt in Taekwondo. I will kick your butt on those pieces. And so that's some of the pieces of, you're going to deal with those challenges, but what's your own unique way to kind of push them in that way? The other part I'd say is one of the things I'm really passionate about is board governance. And so did my ICD, And I find right now, because there's this huge push around diversity, equity, inclusion, getting women involved, people of color, all of it. And so a lot of women and people of color are getting tokenized in general, right? So they're getting put on boards, they're getting hired in positions because the organizations are just trying to be, quote unquote, more diverse and more inclusive. Well, if a demographic has been systemically, doesn't have women or people of color has been systemically shoved aside and ignored for years, there's other areas where they need help. Just by sticking them on the board without a buddy, without onboarding training, all that type of thing is really setting them up for failure. And so I find that's the other challenge that I'm finding. And so what some women that I've chatted with have been placed on boards, they call me up and they're like, Sally, I know the only reason I'm getting put on this board right now is because I'm a female and I'm a person of color. Do I say yes or not? And that's a tough question, right? So what I say to them is, when you're in that situation, I'm like, it's hard to own that space. I'm like, you have to understand, is that organization doing it from a place of genuinely caring? Like, and will you actually have a voice at the table? Because if you join that table, you'll know, and I'm sure Andrea, Lisa, and Sean have seen this, and Dave too, like you've seen other people, you join that table and you're there for like 30, 60, 90 days. And you're like, that's great that you included me, but I'm not really actually included. So that's the other part of just being aware of that. I still say, great, you gave me space, I will use up that space. But there is a balancing piece on it, are the ones that really are top of mind.
Excellent. Well, and I like how you use the superpower, right? People feeling like people are underestimating. I've known you for quite a while. I'm trying to imagine underestimating you. I just don't think that would be a smart move. So that's my experience of you, Sally. And in terms of challenges, so Brynne's question, what are, in terms, I can share as of mine, but I'm curious about well, maybe I will share. One of the ones is just sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's hard. You're in your own head, right? And just the getting out of your own head and taking action, right? Like the courage to act, like Andrea mentioned, is so critical, and it sometimes can be so challenging. And this idea that the biggest battles we fight are between our two ears, and I don't know who that quote came from, but it just comes up over and over and over. Like it can be a real challenge, when you don't really know the answer, and you're trying your hardest to grow your company or do whatever that may be, or deliver on a mandate. Other thoughts from panelists around challenges? Andrea.
I do. Just what you were talking about in terms of setting people up in new places, whether it's on a board or like we're trying to build up a new community of women investors. But to just say, yeah, give us your money and here you go, that's not going to make them investors. That's just going to give them the opportunity to invest. And so one of the things that the Women's Equity Lab and our Atlantic Angel Fund is doing is we're making sure that we give them investor training. So like, what are the things you need to know to be an investor? And I think that's the kind of thing that is really important. If you can't just give somebody the role and expect them to be successful if they haven't, yeah, as you said, if they don't have the same background. And same thing with the women-led businesses, making sure that they have the right mentors and the right support, not just financial, here's a check, good luck. So you're right, that is a big important piece of putting people in the right positions with the right training. One thing that it's funny when you were talking about just being underestimated, on the flip side, there's also like, I know I have imposter syndrome sometimes. And so that's one of the challenges I deal with as a leader, of just like, oh, should I really be here? And you kind of have to talk yourself out of it. It's like, yes, I am in this role, and almost just walk yourself through. And then if you can't come up with the answer of yes, I should be, you just go, well, screw it, I'm here and I'm going to do a great job. But it's the imposter syndrome is real. And I don't think it's just women. I think it's men as well, depending. But yeah, so if people are feeling that, you're not alone, I think is one thing to know.
Lisa.
I think Sean was first. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm trying to do Q&A.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to. I have experienced imposter syndrome, but when this question when we talked about challenges I faced, so I can tell stories of I became CEO March 1st, 2020. So and then we had a bit of a event, and then just to build on that, in July of 2020 we had a ransomware attack that struck our company. So, and oddly enough, those I didn't see as some of the biggest challenges, because when you're in a crisis, there's few decisions. You base it on your values and you run with it. What I find is probably the biggest challenge as a leader is managing change, especially cultural change, when there isn't that burning platform or a crisis. So you're trying to, like, it's slow, incremental change. So you need more patience, more communication. Learned as a leader, they used to say you have to repeat a message 7 times till it's heard. New data is now 12 because of so much information yet. So it is a challenge to kind of make those incremental changes without that crisis. So it's important, but not necessarily urgent. So that's one of the challenges I find.
So this ability to fight the fires, a lot of us are built that way, but it's the that quadrant 2 thinking, right, which is
absolutely
important but non-urgent items that we're supposed to get at, which is, I think, speaks to the strategy piece that Lisa was describing earlier as well. So Lisa.
Yeah, I think I want to sort of go back to something that was an article I read years ago that stuck with me, and that it's that we are all CEOs. We're the CEO of Me Inc. So we have important leadership work, right? So it's about, it's the leading ourselves, our team, our clients, our business community. So there's always this continual loop of, setting a goal, working on it, evaluating, and to Andrea's point, collecting that feedback. But, I think that's always such a great perspective of just thinking of, we all are CEOs, whether we have the title or not, and how are we keeping on evolving ourselves, and it ties back to that inner work, and it's a great opportunity. But yeah, I just thought I'd share that that thinking of ourselves as CEOs all the time, and what are we working on in our executive capacity.
Robin Sharma talks about leader with no title. I think that really resonated with people, because a lot of people feel that way, and certainly, yeah, leadership isn't just about having a title, for sure. Sean, I'm going to get you to chime in on. I learned something the last when we prepped for this about Dillon. And I'm just curious if you'd share the projects and programs that you have to support elevating next generation of diverse leaders.
Sure, Dave. I kind of reluctant to call them projects or programs, because it's really that might suggest that there's an endpoint, but really it's when you speak to inclusion and diversity, it's more of a journey than a destination. So, like many companies, we have an I&D committee, and we have do a 3-year action plan. And I'll point out, we deliberately refer to it as I&D because often you hear it DEI, but from our perspective, you won't achieve your diversity goals without being inclusive first. So it's meaningful for us. So a lot of our journey on the diversity and inclusion front starts with removing the barriers to inclusion, and really trying, it's not about the numbers as much as retaining and creating the environment that's inclusive. And our story kind of goes back to 2009, when some of our women leaders started something called Women in Dillon, and they gathered to talk about recurring themes in our business that were barriers to retention, and they provided recommendations to policies and processes that addressed these barriers, because we were experiencing, especially mid-career, a lot of women were leaving our business. And so fortunately, the leadership at the time listened, and they continue to listen, and those policies and processes have kind of made our business more inclusive, not just for women, but men as well. Out of that came flex policies, caregiver time, leave top-ups, mentoring programs. And then in more recent years, we've partnered with CCDI, the Canadian Centre for Diversion and Inclusion, and as well as Dr. Sonia Kang, she's a professor from U of T, to kind of work on some of the other more systemic issues, preventing us from being more inclusive, and things like recruiting in our job ads and looking at the language of our ads. Dr. Kang's work kind of showed that using what's considered masculine language, often candidates just anticipate gender discrimination. They don't bother implying. And so removing that language from our job ads, and also adopting things like we have for internal leadership transition. We used to have internal job postings, and for select postings now we call an opt-out option. So in other words, anybody we see as qualified, they're in the running and they can opt out if they choose versus having to apply. And then, some of the newer things that are, even there's some discomfort as we introduce it to our organization is trying to remove some of the stigma of things like menopause in the workplace. There's studies from Europe that speak to as many as, I think, 20% of women experiencing menopause kind of report that they opt out of promotions they're offered, or in fact resign from their positions because of it. So starting the conversation there in the workplace to understand the connections between menopause and gender inequity in the workplace. So all of those things are building up, and we continue to take the journey, and it's making a difference for us.
Any thought, like that's incredible work, and kind of ties into what, this idea of good measurement, right? Around, what you want your workforce to look like. And from 2009. So it's quite, as you said, not just a program, right? I'm guessing it's evergreen. Thoughts from other panels?
I have so many thoughts, and I want to clap. Like those are amazing. Those are actually, like, I hadn't heard of all of those kind of tactical ideas. It's great. Building on the not applying, like we know that women won't apply for job, or are less inclined to apply for jobs if they don't feel like they meet all the criteria. That is similar. Like, we also know that they are less inclined to go raise funds, right? Like they might feel like, oh, my company's not ready, my company's not good enough, I don't have the right team. And so they won't go to angel funds or venture funds. And so having those specifically women focused funds does take a little bit of the worry, or maybe encourages them to apply more. So I think that's important. And then secondly, I think just broadly on the idea of how we kind of support the next generation, I do believe in the power of visibility. Like, we need to be able, and this is largely, the media has a very powerful role in this, but also companies making sure that there's diverse panels like this amazing panel today, making sure that, if you're suggesting speakers, you have a great diverse list of speakers to suggest. Like, for example, my younger daughter wants to be an astrophysicist. And so I'm out there trying to find videos and papers and pictures of women doing that job, because she needs to be able to see herself in that job. And we can say, you can be anything to these young girls, but if they don't see the evidence of that, then it comes off as fake, and it's gonna have a negative impact. So the power of visibility, having women and people of color and minorities just everywhere that you think that they need to be seen is huge. Those are my 2 points there.
Okay. There's lots there. Lisa,
Yeah, I think I just shared two. One is a personal reflection, and one is just sort of something we've done from some recent hiring. So in my own leadership journey, I had two examples that stay with me. That the hiring manager hired me for behavioral attributes. I didn't have the technical skills, and one of them in particular was a dramatic big step up But this hiring manager wanted some things that, he didn't want to have to teach. And it was around that interpersonal skills. And he felt that he was a good teacher and I had enough of the intellect that I could learn. And so that was sort of, it's, again, thinking about the, what are the skills that, you hire for. So we've tried to embed that. We're just adding roles to our team. And that's something that we're really focused on. And then the other thing we've done, and this is a shout out to the panelists last year, Shauna Cole, who really works with the underrepresented workforce. She created the Hire Diverse Job Board. And so we use that to reach a broader audience of potential talent for 2 jobs that we recently went to market on. So those are, there's so much to talk about. And Sean, I know you understated some of the things that you shared us in our prep conversation. So that celebration that Andrea gave you, there's a lot more to celebrate that you're downplaying, because it feels like you've been disciplined, focused, and seeing like you said, this is a journey. You're starting to see that journey hit some great milestones. So congrats on that to you and your team.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not very good at internally. We don't celebrate. It's a message we struggle with because we are loath to celebrate internally because we have high standards. So last May our board of 12 is gender balanced. We are 46% women, our staff. Our associate level ownership is 46% women. Our partner group is 20 to 25%. So that's where we are building the pipeline to get that ownership level higher at that level. That's where we need the most improvement. So.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Like, I definitely echo Lisa and Andrea too with that. That's awesome, everything that you're doing, Sean. One thing that I was kind of thinking through some of the comments that Andrea made and Sean made when it comes to, like, let's say interviewing in those positions, if any female or person that's underrepresented is, I'll say, in the hot seat, I think the part that we have to all be mindful of is that there is a tendency and a bias, and it comes from even women asking women questions. So I'll preface it from an investor lens. So there's tons of research out there. If you Google how are women and men ask questions differently when raising capital, you'll get a bunch of different articles. And I'm sure if you reword the same question, how are men and women asked questions differently for job interviews? I can guarantee there's a difference there too. There's a professor at St. Mary's University. Her name's Dr. Ellen Farrell, and she's done a whole coaching and training for especially female entrepreneurs on how to coach women to answer these questions, because all of us, even as women, we make the mistake no different than men do on asking questions, because that's just how we've been trained and these are habits. And so one example that always resonates in my head is that the research would say that men are typically asked more positive questions versus women are negative. So men would be asked questions. So what are you most excited about over the next year when it comes to building your company? Okay, pretty aspirational, dream big kind of thing. And then the women are asked, so how are you going to deal with the recession that's about to happen? And so that's the context of how questions are asked between women and men, and women do it to women too. Someone in there's tons of questions in the Q&A, so awesome, keep those coming. Somebody had mentioned me earlier, made a comment earlier about, for the panelists, what's the thought, because I did call Brynne out. So Brynne, I apologize. I put you on the spot and was a little bit ageist there asking you. My point there was not trying to embarrass you or put you on the spot, was mostly trying to show, okay, there's different demographics that we have, but I absolutely could have asked it in a different way. I could have said, hey, Brynne, I'm guessing you're in your teenage years type of thing, right? Versus actually putting a number on it. But I think part of it also is that us recognizing that we have that. So I appreciate that someone called me out on that with it, because if you don't, it kind of gets swept under the rug. I'm just hoping that anyone that calls someone out is doing it from a place of kindness, not to embarrass the other person, because men make the same issues, women make the same issues, all that type of thing. So, and we can share some of those resources.
Yeah, thanks for addressing that, Sally. I think that's great. Because that is a tricky place to be. Is I feel like a lot of times we tippy-toe around because we're not sure how to be, and even coming from a natural place of curiosity, being sensitive to touching on topics or how we how we engage someone else and that sort of thing, especially in a format like this. So great questions asked. I really appreciate you answering it. I'm gonna cherry pick a question if I may, and there's a bunch of great stuff. We'll get to as many of these as we can. And for those that we don't get to today, we will have answers sent out to questions as best we can post webinar. Where is that one? There was a question just about for you, Brynne. Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, I think I saw it. Wasn't it down there?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I was
here it
looking
is.
at that.
Dave,
I was
I'm curious to hear
thinking
from your daughter, who represents the next generation of women leaders. What is she taking away from today? So as you're listening to the panel and the topics we're touching on, what are you taking away?
Yeah, well, I always thought being a leader was a lot about talking, but what you guys are saying about listening seems like such an important part. And I learned that today, and just about caring and being authentic. And what Sally was saying about people underestimating you and that being an opportunity to prove them wrong, I thought that was so cool. Like, I really like that.
So you're going to lean into that?
Yeah, I am.
Sorry, Dave.
No, that's great. Hey, I love it. I love it. And, because I can think of areas where you feel like you've been underestimated.
Yeah.
And instead of, leaning away, you're going to lean into it, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Great coaching from Sally. Thank you so much for that. Now you have a question.
Oh, yeah. So this is for Lisa. Like, what's your favorite part about running your own business?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it would be, and the women in the audience will appreciate this, is being able to make the decisions 100% on my own. And one of the very memorable moments in my first year of business, one of my network came to me to sponsor an event. And in my old corporate world, no matter what the amount was, I'd have to go and ask for permission to sponsor this, an event. And I loved, it was a cause, it was youth entrepreneurship. And I loved this person who was organizing the event, and I'd been an attendee, and I said yes. And I wrote the check. And for me, that was completely energizing. And it just felt, a wonderful way to kind of be able to do things my own way. So that would be one thing, is that being able to make decisions. And the other thing for me, it goes back to a little bit about what Andrea talked about. It's that energizing. I worked hard in a lot of big corporates, and sometimes it was energy draining. And what I was missing was it wasn't connected to my purpose and passion. And being an entrepreneur means that, and doing the business that I'm doing, is I'm completely connected to my purpose and passion, and I'm loving what I'm doing. And even though I work long hours, it doesn't feel like it's super hard work. And my husband, when I started this business, he said, a hard day at Pivotal Growth is nothing for you now. He's like, it's so much easier. You finish your day with energy and there's happiness. So I love that question, because I think as entrepreneurs, we take a big risk in starting our business. And when I left corporate, there was some judgment because I left behind, the coveted compensation package. So you definitely want to find things that you love about the business. And I'd say there's some great support people. Your dad supported me from day one in launching my business. I'm forever appreciative of that, right? So he was a mentor. He didn't see me as a competitor, and that was a huge lift to help me stand strong and do that. And that's another great thing, is that you've got these people around who believe in you and support you.
And part of that with Lisa is she holds the bar so high that I thought she'd be such a good influence on me. I should certainly be doing business with her, because I don't certainly want to compete with her. So it was self-serving. Those are great. I appreciate you asking that. And I kind of feel like you've got an entrepreneurial bend, like you're thinking of starting your own company.
Yeah.
Or taking over a vision. I'm going to keep putting that in there. Maybe she'll do it. So we're going to move into the Q&A section. We got like a bunch here, and we're going to, generally people kind of drop, I think, off because of lunch hour or something. We do have some time built in for Q&As. If you can stay with us, great. I'm going to try to get to a few of these questions. I'm going to cherry pick a little bit. We will, for those people that have to drop off, thank you so much for participating and being part of this. And we're gonna continue to go into, and just, I'm looking at a couple of the questions. Actually, I'm gonna start with this one here. Oh my goodness. This is trickier than I thought. Oh, here it is. So someone anonymously put in, I want to champion diversity for personal reasons and arguably the least aggressive sector in our economic, in their economy, sorry, road building and heavy civil. And our company is white, male dominated, and has an average age of 55, and promoting hiring of First Nations people and women in social media, and in our employment ads with limited success. So this is a real, someone dealing with a real challenge, right? I understand their reticence, but how do we attract more women into our sector? So I just, wow, that's a good one. Who wants to give their perspective on that?
I feel like Sean, your programs at Dillon put you on the spot. You've got firsthand experience of doing some of these last several years.
Sean's being voluntold.
Voluntold. I think it is a challenge, especially in a industry that's male dominant. So, it needs to be values based. So, you need to start with, why are you doing it? Why do you believe it? And with that will guide addressing maybe the things in your business that are preventing it from being successful. So it'll likely be, it's not a welcoming environment or an inclusive environment. I think Andrea mentioned it earlier, they need to see themselves in your business. So if they don't, it takes a lot of courage to be that first one, and then they got to put up with a lot of stuff if the culture isn't right, and you're going to be challenged to retain them. So you need to have your clear values, and you need to remove, take the hard steps to change things. That if you could say it one thing, but in the actions in the back shop or whatever is not supporting that, it will fail. So it's a first step is going to be making some changes, and you need to find that cohort of folks to start, and having more than one to start, and giving them the support and demonstrating that you're behind it. And it's going to take tough actions probably to shift the culture.
Any other thoughts? Thanks, Sean. See a couple other, both Lisa and Sally have your unmuted. Who wants to chime in?
This picks up on Sean's comments. One of the things that back to that transformational leadership, it is really important that there is a sponsor as high up as you can go. And so, that's where the authority and influence in the traditional private sector organization is really powerful. And any of the projects that we do that are transformational, we will always seek to say who's the executive sponsor and keep them aligned. So you can't go this alone. It's harder to go this alone. And so there's a little bit of internal selling and lobbying and managing up. If you're, depending on where you are in the organization, that is highly important and also hard work, but that'll really help to ease that longer journey and roadmap. So that finding that executive sponsor and champion is the add-on I'd contribute.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The other thing I'll mention too is careful that you're not tokenizing, right? So if your organization already has a small percentage of, let's say, women or underrepresented communities, then make sure you're not putting the pressure back on them again. It's like they've already systemically for years and generations have had to deal with all the BS, I'll say, and now you're making them do more work to try to do it. It's actually your job as the 55-year-old male, I would say, to actually create that change. And so be careful with that, because there's also this other side where, for my area, like I've looked at, like there's 50 or so economic development agencies across Atlantic Canada. There are 5 of them that are led by a person of color. 3 of them are because they serve people of color demographics, right? The other 2 are myself, Durindra from UNB. And even in the second tier of senior executives, there's 1 person from Dell Innovate. Everywhere else, I don't actually, I can't find them. There might be another 2 or 3 that I forgot. And so when you're looking at sort of those stats, just be really mindful of that. And if you do want to create that change and want to create a program like Sean mentioning that he does at Dillon, like if you can, compensate them for it. Build it into their 40-hour-a-week job. Don't make it a 40-a-week job plus this 10-hour committee thing that they also have to help with, because that's just unfair. And realistically, if you genuinely care about it, then put your money where your mouth is, actually compensate them. Maybe there's a mini honorarium, whatever that is, for them to help with that initiative that you're trying to push, is what I would also say would be kind of the bigger practical logistical items, I'd say, to be mindful of. Yeah, with that, because it's too often the same issues get pushed, and that demographic is already burdened by it, right? There's I forget what it's called, after there's like a whole line around it after the killing of George Floyd. There's like, it's a saying called like not black exhaustion, but there's a keyword, someone will find it, where basically the Black community was exhausted from just like, amazing that the media was paying attention to everything now, but there's also, you're re-traumatizing a demographic that has been dealing with it for generations and generations. And it's no different for women.
So it's not, or Sean, you're gonna touch on?
Yeah, I was, picking up with Sally, Dave started the panel off with a land acknowledgement. And, the example of that is going to your First Nation or Indigenous employees and asking them to write your land acknowledgement. It's not going to land well. It's like, no, you're supposed to, acknowledge my land. Like, so it's one of those things where you really need to not tokenize it, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. People will see through it and won't be successful.
Right. Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. I'm going to touch on another, and it's it's not a quick fix, is what we're hearing here. There's a lot of thought that goes into this, and really appreciate the perspectives that bring. Tricia Perry, who I believe is in the Wallace McCain Institute with you, Sean. My question relates to courage. Without question, women are underrepresented in leadership positions. As a result, many women leaders have been mentored by men, for better or worse. I'm wondering how we encourage and support women to question what their authentic leadership style is, and give them the courage to lead from that place, particularly in male-dominated industries. The skills women are thought to access more naturally are not sought. The essential for transformation leadership. So that's wow, excellent comment and kind of question around that. Tricia, anyone want to? Lisa, you got your mic off?
Yeah, I thought I'd share. It is a big question, and obviously, I know I've been a woman at the boardroom table for a lot of my career, and happy to see that's changing. And one of the things that I learned after leaving my corporate role that I wish I'd learned earlier, I had Pat Bradshaw as the retired dean of commerce from St. Mary's, and I'd had lunch with her, and she's an avid feminist and very well read on power and power dynamics and board. And one of the nuances that she put on my radar was about the way men and women communicate. And it was an aha moment for me personally. And she talked about inductive and deductive communication. And so, just in the nuance of that is that the way I was communicating, and I still do it, it's a well-entrenched habit, is I build up to what I want to say and then make my point. And that is often a female style. And the male style is they make the point and they back it up. And so there's this, what I'd call, and the reason I'm sharing that is that there is an underlying way that we prefer to communicate. And yet there's also a flex that we always want to be considering. And when I talk about that flex, it's also one of the terms that we use when we do executive coaching, is that, you want to flex to meet people where they're a little closer to where they're at. So you have these really good conversations. And even though, there's a whole tension, is you just want to be you and you want to have a conversation the way you want to, there's this whole systemic issue that's behind that. So what's the, the incremental or the flex complex way that you could create some nuanced conversation. So, you know, I would say that my bias and personal learnings would be not as much about courage, but learning skill building. I wish I had done baseline leadership assessments much earlier. I wish I had had an executive coach or a leadership coach earlier in my career. There's so much that, you know, I would have hyper learned in the last 7.5 years since really getting clear into this. So there are some things there, and some people may find that they may not agree with that, but I think there's a balance there, and some flex and some give and take while we work on changing the system and culture. And those are big, long goals that have to play out. So that would be my thoughts there. I'd be interested in what others have to contribute.
I love the idea of just knowing your tendencies, right? And that way, you know, you can shift to be heard, right? And the concept of seeking to understand and be understood, I think are good qualities in men and women. Sean, do you want to?
Yeah, this is more of an observation than maybe an answer, a solution. Maybe the others can help. But what I've experienced the power of just letting my emotions show and all that, and it's like, you know, being that vulnerable leader, and it's paid back to me in spades. But I do feel it's that much more difficult. You know, I'll be in front of a room and I'll be proud of something and break up and all that, and I've, you know, first to be embarrassed, but then I've been embraced as a result. But I don't think the experience is the same for women. It's almost, there's a reluctance, or there's a different experience, and it's like, so then their superpower, their strength on that side is not being unleashed, and I don't know what the answer to that is, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, excellent point. Sally, go ahead.
Yeah, there might not come out as eloquent, I guess, in some ways. When I look at last week, I was having a chat with my executive coach, and the homework that I have is that I need to observe executive presence in leaders that I admire. And I was like, and it's been about a week. My page is blank because I'm having this, I guess, challenge, or this sort of divergent. I'm like, okay, there's the traditional models of what I think a leader looks like, right? If it's politicians, it is a lot of men. If it's the Barack Obamas, versus there's the other ones where are more casual, like very down to earth. And I'm like, but they're so different, right? Because I'm pretty sure her next question to me will be, so which one do you want to be? Because part of that conversation is, how do you as an individual want to show up in that room in that authentic style? And so I think all of us are kind of figuring it out as we go. There's a part of me that also wants to believe that I think it shifts as we mature or have other experiences as well, that I think that authentic leadership will shift, but I think your core values and principles will always stay consistent. And so what are those core principles and values that you always hold true is sort of what I'm trying to keep top of mind for myself. The other piece that I think it was Andrea earlier, or Lisa, that mentioned like imposter syndrome. And something to sort of think about. I was doing this interview with a lady named Avira Milan Gervais. She's based in Halifax. She's writing a book on women leadership. And I've known her for like 10 years, but realistically, I met her when I was early 20s, and now I'm mid 30s. And she asked me a question. She's like, Sally, where does your confidence come from? And I was like, it totally caught me off guard. Oh, am I frozen?
No, you're doing good.
I'm good. Yeah, she asked me, she's like, where does your confidence come from? And I just kind of froze, and I was like, what do you mean? What confidence? Right? There's a part of it that, yes, I'm confident. I know that. But she's like, were you always like that? Or sorry, I asked her back. I was like, that's a good question, Vera. I was like, I don't know. I was like, but you met me when I was early 20s, 10 years back. I was like, was I that confident then? And her answer to me was like, well, I would have called it cocky, is what she said. And like, I love Vera, right? Like, it's still, and I was like, interesting. I was like, why? And she's like, because you came off way more confident than I would have expected for someone your age. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then as I was like reflecting with her, and I'm very much a verbal processor, I said to her, I'm like, I think back then it was actually a lot more fake confidence, similar to if you're a little kid and you're on the playground, if you show up as that super shy, potentially quote unquote weak kid, you're going to get bullied and you're going to get picked on. And I think part of that is like that authentic leadership is like, what are the experiences that have brought you along that way as an immigrant kid that had bounced between being able to speak English, not being able to speak English, all this type of thing, knowing what those like defense mechanisms were and are they actually healthy or not is something that I find I've had to unpack when you start to think through like experiences of that when it comes to confidence and how you show up, because I think all of us have a story and we should reflect on it.
Yeah, and draw from it, right, and build on it. I love that. Let's take one more question here.
Sorry, Dave, could I just add on that? Because I think this is we talked about this last year, that confidence or self-confidence is a really important conversation for women and women in leadership. And so I just love that there's some openness around that. 2 years ago, we did a white paper on it. And where we landed is there's this teeter-totter between self-confidence and self-critic in women. And so there's this tension point that plays out that affects how you show up, that leadership presence, right? And one of the nuances I've started to talk a little bit more about in the work that we do is there's the self-confidence, which is the confidence in your inner abilities and who you are. And then there's the confidence about the work that you're doing. And the two there could be a slight nuance depending on what's going on. So that, Sally, thank you for raising that, because that is at the heart of a lot of attributes of successful leadership and professional development and courage and stretching into roles that are, you might not feel completely comfortable taking on. So lots more to unpack, but I just thought I'd add those couple little nuances for the participants' frame of reference as well.
We have a strong group of attendees staying with us, so obviously people are getting something from this, which is awesome, because I'm really enjoying kind of the dialogue here. So we got time for one more, I believe, and it's and there's some others there, and I apologize we can't get to all of them, but as I mentioned, we will send answers to from the panelists out to people after. I don't know if panelists knew that we would be doing that, but hopefully they'll be okay with that. Andrea made an interesting point about women getting things done versus perfectionism, presumably by men. Women do tend to have heavier workloads. Any advice on how to manage that burden and focusing on the things that matter?
I'm happy to start with that one. I feel like somebody asked me yesterday about, is it possible to, have it all? Because that's kind of the lean in idea, and you're supposed to have kids, have a family, have a job, have a social life, exercise, make sure you meditate, sit on boards, volunteer. Like, I don't think you can do everything. So for me personally, like there are, there's gonna be times when things suffer. Maybe my social life goes down while I'm, taking on a new job at work, and then, make sure you have your vacation time, but whatever balance you pick as your top 2, 3, 4 most important things in your life, I think the important thing is to be present in them. So like when I'm at work, I am at work. And when I'm with my kids, I am fully enjoying being with them. And that's kind of the only way I've been able to balance doing everything. I also think it's important that as a society, we support and celebrate and build up the men that are taking on more of the traditional women roles, like at home, whether, that means the men take paternity leave instead of the women, if your husband works part-time instead of full-time, like rather than kind of questioning that, let's celebrate those kind of things so that it is not just the default that women do everything.
Yeah, well said. Anyone else want to jump in? template?
I'll add on. I think the other way the number of conversations I've had with leaders, and I'm fortunate my stepkids are growing now, but early days it was different. It was about work-life integration. Balance, I think, is not achievable, and so it's being very intentional about what are your boundaries, right? If you're going to pick your kids up from school, when my oldest stepdaughter was in junior high, there was some challenges going on with her circle, so I started leaving work to get her from school and things like that. So what are those trade-offs? What won't you compromise? What will you compromise? And so that you decide where it goes, and knowing that you're going to have to say no to some things because you need to sleep, you need to eat, right? You need time with your family. So the reality is there is never enough time in the week to do everything. So there's got to be some no's in there and some of that boundary setting. So that's where having that vision, that plan, that integration defined, I think is super helpful, so that you can confidently say thank you, but no, or yes, I'm in, or I've got to adjust that.
Actually, and to that point, I think, Sean, you mentioned earlier, like flexible work schedules for everybody, not just women, but like that everybody has them. You see people using them across the board, leaders, employees, men, women, like that makes everybody's lives easier. And like some people, like I like to work at 5 a.m. and leave early, and comes back to having great results too. So if you have good results that you can measure, it doesn't really matter when people get their things done.
Mm-hmm. You'd hope. That's the way it should be. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point. And I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, because I was thinking about when I learned, the difference between balance and integration, right? And the importance of that, because it is, what is to balance all of these things, I found very hard personally. But to try to integrate in the sense of making choices, right? And there's consequences to some of the choices we make. Sean, I think
Yeah, I think what people are trying to describe. Someone used the example that stuck with me is like, we're all juggling lots of things, lots of balls in the air, and you just have to have crystal clear which balls are glass and which ones are rubber that can be dropped, and you don't need to keep them all in the air all the time.
Nice. Excellent.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to drop some rubber balls. I like that.
Don't drop the glass ones. That's the important thing. Well, we're coming to the end here, and what I was hoping we could do just as to closing off is I'll start with each of the panelists, and then I'm going to get Brynne to round it out. But I'm just interested, like, what is there something that came up from today's conversation that you're taking away? In terms of, from one of the panelists or some of this dialogue, is there a particular thing that's come up for you? And that I'm, this is a shout out to Wallace McCain Institute and some of the stuff we do, and takeaways in our peer group forums. Curious about things that you're taking away from this conversation today. Let's go first. Go ahead.
I'm going to take the things that I wrote down, and I'm probably going to have to follow up with you, Sean, are just those tactical programs and like hiring tools and just ideas there. I think those were really great. So that's what I'm going to take away.
Yeah, I have
there's
that
so
I can
much.
share with the pan and like in the audience as well. I got a few links to some of Sonia Can's papers. And
awesome. Yeah, I think people find that really helpful, Sean. What's the takeaway for you, Sean?
My takeaway was just Lisa early on, this inside out leadership, I always talk, in my mind, self-awareness, but that perspective of how she framed it, that stuck with me, and I'll take that one away. So
great. Inside out leadership. Awesome. Sally, you have a thought?
Yeah, like mine is definitely like even tying into what Lisa was mentioning. I think it was Trisha's question around that authentic self and how we each show up. I think it's a takeaway, but it's also like this reminder that it takes a lot of effort for that. And so I think it's more being intentional of like us actually individually reflecting on that and how we want to show up, because each of our environments are completely different. So that's a piece of definitely like Sean's tactical stuff. I'm like, any resources, Sean, be awesome.
Yeah, Lisa, what you?
Yeah, there was I think a couple things that the one I'd say I love, and it resonated with the participants as well, is that superpower. And, you know, I think that's, you know, being more bold about talking about our superpower is the great opportunity. So, you know, Sally, thank you for setting the bar around that. And then the other one, I think it leaves me more reflective, is the conversation around the emotional vulnerability. You know, and I loved hearing Sean's outlook about how his vulnerability is part of his engagement with the team, and then Andrea raising the question around, you know, women's emotions as well. So that is an interesting tension point. You know, and having come from very performance cultures, you know, I learned to put my armor on for a lot of years. And so that's, you know, it's an interesting point when you're thinking you know, authenticity is the best way to lead, and yet there is still a systemic stereotyping of what leadership is. So that's you know, there's a reflection there for me that I want to take away from today's conversation. So I always love those conversations that you've got this disruptive thought that stays with you, that you want to explore more.
Yeah, exactly. So Brynne?
Well, I think what you were saying, Andrea, about like your daughter seeing people, like women doing things they want to do, like how that's so important to women role models doing things you want to do, and how that will make you feel more confident in what you want to do. I just thought that was really cool.
Thank you, Brynne.
You're welcome. Babe.
Awesome. Second, are we gonna do this again?
Yeah.
You'll invite me back next year?
Oh yeah, I think I will. I'll let you back. Don't worry.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone for participating, and to each of the panelists, thank you so much for, you know, giving your thoughts and sharing so authentically, really, you know, and what you've learned. It's you know, so helpful to the conversation, and there's a lot of it's very rich. So it's neat to have a conversation where you're not sure where it's going to go necessarily. I'd also like to thank people that are, you know, supporting this, Dave Stonehouse and Vicky Bates in the background, giving us support when, you know, making us all look good, showing up and putting up slides like this. And if you want to get in touch with any of the panelists at any point, we'll have the contact information. We'll share it in the recording, and we will be sending information out, the recording and answers to many of the questions that were asked. And I apologize that we couldn't get to all of them, but it's great. I'm so happy that there was questions. You always worry about that. Is that, you know, what if no one asks questions? How do I ask, you know, put my own question in the Q&A? So that was not the issue at all. So we'll just leave it at that. A big thank you to everyone, and take care. And this is a great way to celebrate International Women's Day.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. It was a great, really enjoyed my time with everyone, and yeah, great conversation spurred from the questions and the as well.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you. Bye.